and to imply that we should just ignore the impact that Caitlin Clark had on this team, this league, this sport. Nah, it doesn't work that way.
After basketball superstar Sue Bird changed her mind about Caitlin Clark, the WNBA went crazy.
Bird calls out ESPN host for, quote, hating on WNBA playoff ratings after Caitlin Clark's exit. You say what?
Yes, it is correct. The WNBA is doing just fine without Clark, according to Sue Bird, a former Caitlin backer who criticized Stephen A. Smith. Caitlin is currently on a pleasant vacation, but she may move to Europe in the future. Sue, however, thinks that the numbers are still enormous, which is untrue.
Has been impacting the WNBA well before this year. This is not a new thing. Sure. This is, in that way, I do think Caitlin's being used as a pawn. Caitlin didn't bring citizens to the WNBA. This has been happening, and that I think is what's been such a shock for all.
Sue was defending Caitlin at the time, but it appears that she's had enough because Caitlin's absence has caused a stir on social media. Fans are reluctant to watch more WNBA because they want her back.
Numbers with Caitlin Clark are astronomical. She is a big draw. She brings in all the things. And yes, the games where she's not playing have lower viewership. But in the WNBA playoffs are still breaking records from previous WNBA.
There are the facts. The WNBA is descending back into reality without Caitlin. The number of spectators has decreased with every game that has been played without Caitlin. Sue, however, thinks that Caitlin's absence from basketball won't result in any issues.
Want it to grow if it's certain people at the face, and there is still this undertone of jealousy that for some reason I cannot get around calling it anything else but that, because I don't know what else it could be. I thought it was going to get better this season, but it hasn't. There are still people who seemingly, to me, feel like they just don't want Caitlin to be a part.
Rachel Demita raised an excellent point. When Caitlin is the face of the sport, WNBA legends don't want it to flourish. Instead of dealing with Caitlin's rivalry, they would prefer to start over.
Problem, Sue Bird. I know that you gave her props and you acknowledged how phenomenal she was in terms of a draw. What Shannon Sharp and I were guilty of saying was that not enough folks were appreciating.
The WNBA experience of Caitlin Clark was nothing short of revolutionary. But the moment she left the playoffs, the WNBA seemed to have lost its vitality. The league may now be in serious peril due to the growing suspicions about Europe. At first, WNBA legend Sue Bird had nothing but admiration for Caitlin Clark. Bird had been a vocal advocate for Clark, believing that she was a player who could improve the game. Sue Bird realized early on that Caitlin Clark had the potential to transform women's basketball and wasn't just another rookie.
Moved home games to bigger arenas when Indiana came to town to accommodate more fans. I'm not finished. Attendance for the entire league is up nearly 50% this year, and Indiana leads all teams with an average attendance of 17,035, up 319% from a year ago.
However, when Sue Bird started to minimize Clark's influence, things took an unexpected turn. This was surprising, especially from someone who had praised Clark so much in the past. Bird abruptly claimed that Caitlin Clark's presence had had no impact on WNBA ratings. Bird seemed to imply that Clark's absence had little bearing on the league's current problems, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Many supporters were perplexed and even offended by Bird's abrupt change in viewpoint. Stephen A. Smith is the one who has continuously stood with Caitlin Clark. Smith, who is well known for his audacious viewpoints and unvarnished criticism, has never shied away from controversy. Additionally, Clark was quick to voice his opinions after leaving the playoffs. Smith didn't hold back when he said that the playoff excitement had been dampened by Clark's absence.
Let's say the ratings aren't the same with Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever now eliminated. Game 1 of the Aces Liberty matchup on Sunday drew an average of 929,000 viewers. It was down nearly 50% from last Sunday's Fever Sun contest. By the way, not only was viewership down.
For Smith, losing the WNBA's top draw was more important than simply one player quitting the game. He emphasized that the league needs to acknowledge how crucial Clark was to their success, pointing out that viewership had drastically decreased since her departure. Smith's position was a call to action rather than merely a casual remark. Sue Bird disagreed with his belief that the WNBA should do more to support players like Clark and maintain the momentum. She publicly criticized Stephen A. Smith for his remarks, claiming that he was incorrect to blame Caitlin Clark's absence alone for the drop in playoff viewing. Bird retorted that there were other variables at work and that no single player was responsible for the excitement surrounding the playoffs. Fans and commentators took sides in the contentious discussion that followed Bird's denial of Smith's assertions. Stephen A. Smith, on the one hand, thought that the main cause of the excitement surrounding the playoffs was Caitlin Clark. Conversely, the game's legend Sue Bird maintained that the WNBA was greater than any individual player, even one as significant as Clark.
A lot of this noise came by people that were sitting on this network. They tried to minimize her, said, well, you giving her all this credit. What about the women that came before her? What the women came before her, what they did cannot be taken away. That ain't got nothing to do with Caitlin Clark. But there was a lot of people tried to make sure they keep Caitlin Clark in her place, because what you're doing, if you give her all this shine, you minimize what they done. We saw the ratings, we saw the merchandise sales, we saw the attendance, but y'all want to make it about something.
Sue Bird continued to challenge Stephen A. Smith. She strengthened her position and refused to acknowledge that the fall in WNBA viewership was mostly due to Caitlin Clark's departure. Bird insisted that Clark wasn't the only reason for the decline in interest, despite the fact that ratings fell precipitously following Clark's departure. Many fans were irritated by this failure to recognize the Caitlin Clark influence. After all, the statistics showed that when Clark was playing, viewership increased dramatically, and when she was off the court, it drastically decreased. Those who had been keeping a close eye on the playoffs didn't like the insistence that there were other causes for the downturn. It was difficult to ignore the connection between Clark's departure and the decline in ratings, as fans noted that the excitement around the games had significantly diminished following her departure. However, Bird persisted in standing her ground and refused to give Clark the credit that many thought she was due.
Clark has created more buzz around the basketball landscape and has actually transformed and revived a league that was the WNBA, and she is getting paid a measly $28 million.
As the argument over Caitlin Clark's influence persisted, this gap between Sue Bird and the supporters became more noticeable. Many felt that the WNBA's veterans were out of touch with the league's present situation because Bird refused to acknowledge Clark's influence. The very luminaries they had once looked up to were now alienating fans who had been lured to the WNBA by Clark's performances. Many were concerned that Bird, who had previously been viewed as a mentor to younger players, was suddenly minimizing Clark's importance. It made people wonder if the WNBA was prepared to change, or if it was trapped in the past and unable to welcome the next generation of stars. One of the most perplexing aspects of the whole scenario has been the WNBA's unwillingness to acknowledge Caitlin Clark's significance. It was evident that Clark was unique as soon as she joined the league.
Don't y'all want a greater profile? Don't y'all want more notoriety? Don't y'all want more hype? I understand that it's going on still without her now that she's out of the playoffs because the games have been great. But the fact of the matter is she swelled the interest in the sport.
Her social media presence was unprecedented. Her games attracted enormous crowds, and her ability to engage with fans distinguished her from many of her contemporaries. Nevertheless, the WNBA was reluctant to completely embrace the Caitlin Clark impact in spite of all of this. The WNBA failed to capitalize on the surge of attention that Clark brought to the league, whether it was because of internal politics, player envy, or a straightforward refusal to recognize her star power. Rather than positioning her as the WNBA spokesperson, the league seems satisfied to let her succeed independently without the full backing of its marketing apparatus. The league's viewership figures started to decline once Clark left the playoffs. Therefore, this omission would prove to be costly.
The Clark effect is definitely real. I mean, we can all see that. However, experiencing it in person is totally different. I was at the Fever in Indiana game last night, and the amount of 22s that I saw on the way to the arena and inside the Capital One Arena might as well have just been a home game for Caitlin Clark. Not Indiana, Caitlin Clark. The thing is, that didn't surprise me. But what did surprise me was how packed the game.
The WNBA lost out on a chance to expand its viewership and cement its position in the sports industry by not properly acknowledging the Caitlin Clark effect. Rather, it now has to deal with dwindling viewership, irate fans, and a lack of excitement surrounding its major events. The league is in a risky situation that could be challenging to recover from because of its unwillingness to accept Clark's star power. Stephen A. Smith has continued to be one of Caitlin Clark's most outspoken advocates throughout it all. Smith has often pointed out what he perceives to be an agenda against Clark, while others have minimized her influence or even disregarded her achievements. Whether it's through on-court targeting or a lack of off-court promotion, Smith has drawn attention to how the league appears to treat Clark differently than other players. He has discussed how Clark has been targeted with fouls, picked out by opponents, and ignored when it comes to league-wide accolades.
Respectfully, with your platform, you could have been doing this 3 years ago if you wanted to.
All right, we gotta go.
Stephen, I'm talking to you. I'm talking to you.
Wow.
Don't do that. I'm talking to you about the power that you have.
Really
you
appreciate
missed, my girl, but you've missed a lot of episodes of first.
Many of Caitlin Clark's supporters are starting to advocate for her to quit the WNBA entirely as the debate surrounding her treatment there intensifies. They contend that Clark would be better off competing in the EuroLeague, where she would probably be treated with more respect and have greater financial prospects. Fans think that in Europe, Clark's skills would be fully recognized and she wouldn't have to put up with the ongoing abuse and targeting she experiences in the WNBA. Many of Clark's fans are urging her to make the decision as quickly as possible, and this movement is becoming more and more vocal. They think Clark would be better suited playing in a league that appreciates her abilities and efforts because the WNBA has shown its true colors.
Be a team overseas who would love to snatch Caitlin Clark away from us and give her a crazy offer. I mean, Ice Cube was about to give her $5 million to play in less than 10 games in the Big Three. So the money is there, and if these owners are smart with it, I could definitely see more WNBA players going overseas and possibly not.
Another main reason why fans want Caitlin Clark to think about leaving the WNBA is the financial prospects in Europe. The EuroLeague might provide her with a more lucrative career, even though the WNBA has found it difficult to fully utilize her star power. Not only would Clark make more money in Europe, but she would also receive the recognition she merits as one of the top women's basketball players. Supporters contend that Clark wouldn't have to cope with the small-time politics and jealousy that have dogged her WNBA career in Europe. Rather, she could concentrate on what she does best, dominate on the court, and keep building her reputation as one of the game's most captivating players. It's no secret that Caitlin Clark is a target in the WNBA due to her dominance. Instead of welcoming the additional competition, some current players and legends have publicly stated their wish for her to quit the league. Even if it meant losing fans, they think the league would be better off without her. Caitlin Clark is too talented, according to these players, and her presence makes the competition more competitive than they would like. Because of her ability to raise the bar, Clark has become a threat to some players, especially those who are accustomed to being the league's best performers. They perceive her as someone who challenges the current quo rather than as a welcome addition. A growing effort among some players to force Clark out of the WNBA has resulted from this jealousy, even if it means fewer spectators will watch.
When they got eliminated from the playoffs, the attendance dropped. The ratings drop. If the WNBA is more, it is, and I get it. Why aren't people?
Even more unexpected is the fact that some players are prepared to put up with fewer viewers if it means they won't have to compete against Caitlin Clark. Instead than encouraging the WNBA to develop and improve, this kind of thinking exposes a deeper problem inside the league. If it meant avoiding the fierce competition that Clark brings to the court, some players would prefer to see it stay static. This readiness to forego viewership in exchange for less competition says a lot about the WNBA's current situation. Some of the league's players are more concerned with preserving their own domination, even if it means sacrificing the league's success, even though the league should be focused